So the webinar will be recorded, and playback video as well as these simple slides will be available as a replay for everyone who registered. Our sponsors for the 2021 season include Alpha Graphics of Stamford, Altamira, Austin Lawrence Group, my firm, Media Associates, and Wonderland. Our panelists this evening, we have three amazing panelists. Hope you guys are ready. We have Andy Yost. He's a COO and CMO at High Perform Flex. Chris George, chairman and founder of the Subscription Trade Association. And Leo Strepczewski, head of marketing at Repeat. Andy, why don't we start with you? Could you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Great, thanks, Ken. And thank you for letting me cross into Connecticut tonight. I live in New Jersey, so without this, it probably wouldn't have happened this way, so thank you. I've been immersed in membership experiences from an early stage of my career, having spent the first portion of my career at American Express, and have taken that into media for about the past 15 years, most recently being the chief marketing officer at Gannett. I'm now working on a startup in the future of work space, and I'm excited to be here tonight to talk about this important topic.
Thanks. Chris?
Yes, thanks again, Ken, for having me on. So I'm the chairman and co-founder of SUBTA, which is the Subscription Trade Association. Prior to that, I was the CEO and co-founder of the Gentleman's Box. So I have a ton of experience in building direct-to-consumer subscription brands. I now chair the trade association, as well as run the largest event in the world for direct-to-consumer subscriptions, which is called Sub Summit. And happy to be here and be involved in this conversation.
Awesome. Leo?
Yeah, thanks, Ken. Spent the last 8 years or so now kind of ping-ponging back and forth from software to direct-to-consumer businesses and back again. So now on the software side, serving direct-to-consumer businesses. So excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Well, thanks very much. My name, again, is Ken Lempit. I'm president of the AMA Southern Connecticut chapter and also president and chief business builder at Austin Lawrence. We're a company that helps SaaS firms, software as a service companies, to grow their businesses and have an abiding interest in subscription marketing, pricing, packaging, everything subscription as a result. So this is a topic area that's really near and dear to my heart. So hopefully I'll be able to add a little value as your moderator this evening. So why don't we jump right into it? When we did our prep session, I think we had a really great idea to start with the why of subscriptions. I think that everybody's aware that so many things are being offered on a subscription basis, both on the consumer side and business. But I think why is a really big question. And Chris, do you want to maybe take us out? I think this was part of the conversation you were pretty passionate about. So.
For sure. I believe for a few things. So I think we're starting to see that subscriptions are pretty much in all part of our lives. You can almost subscribe to everything from the food delivered to the items that are in your bathroom, household goods, the streaming services. When you really think about it, you probably subscribe to 10 to 15 things, and you think about apps and other products that you use daily. And for me, it comes in for a couple of reasons. One, I believe that this next generation, Gen Zs, they're about usership over ownership. They like to use things as they like, not own them anymore. I joke that I lease a car and my dad thinks it's crazy because I lease a car, but I'm like, I want a new car every 2 years. Gen Zs like to travel, they like to work on the beach. They like to rent instead of own. So they want to use things as they want and stop using them as they don't want. So there's less ownership, there's less upfront money. When you think about like programs and softwares we've used in the past, good examples like Microsoft Office. 5 years ago, you paid $500 for that program. Now you pay a monthly fee, you get the most updated version, and you can cancel when you want. And so I'm just starting to see that across the board in almost every part of our life. And I think that that's where things are trending and why more and more brands are pivoting to that model. And on top of that, one more thing. it's about building a relationship with the consumer. So these brands need to build relationships, and that's happening through subscriptions.
Awesome. Thank you. Hey, Andy, do you want to talk a little bit about, how you see subscriptions permeating, like we started with just a handful of things that were by subscription. Most of them were the magazines and newspapers in our mailbox, but can you talk about how we got here a little bit?
Sure, and you're right. I think subscriptions are not necessarily a new concept, but it was really probably more of a focus on content that would be delivered to you, and it was probably more focused on a price value equation versus the experience itself. So, with the age of digital, publishers in particular had to really start to take a hard look at what was different about their experience from other publishers, and that's where we've started to see brands like the New York Times and Wall Street Journal really invest against making sure that first and foremost their brand stood for something, and secondly they started to create experiences beyond just the great journalism that would enable people to feel that this is something that's worth paying for. So a lot of what's gone into the efforts over the past 20 plus years have been, how to evolve your legacy print product to one that, can live in the digital age. And that has, also caused organizations to have to think really differently about how they're structured to accommodate that. So investment in data and analytics, marketing capabilities that they didn't have to, that never existed in the past before, and really, focused, concerted effort to, stay on top of, what their readers cared most about, so that they could ensure that they're delivering against that. To Chris's point, back to the usership versus ownership piece too. I feel strongly that people are looking for not only unique experiences, but high utility, right? And so my daughter was home with us during the pandemic, and for her, one of the things she wanted to experience was clothes that she would never buy for herself. So she subscribed to something called Newly, which is like Rent the Runway. And for her, it was all about the serendipity and the discovery of what showed up in this box once a month for her. And so, yes, she needed clothes to wear and she had her own, but this was a cool and interesting way to discover new things that might be interesting as well. And so I think that's not only something that, commerce, companies have to think about, but publishers also need to be thinking about what's unique and different, and what's the serendipity that's going to come forward with your experience.
Yeah, I guess the media companies have to be a lot more like software companies in how they approach revenue generation, right? They're looking at who's using what on their products, and how active users are, things like that.
Absolutely. And it's fundamentally about customer lifetime value in all of those cases, right? And so, driving that engagement to, extract either more, in the case of a publisher, a subscription, you may be a subscriber, but there's also ad revenue to be derived from that relationship as well. And so the deeper that you can take your reader into your content, there's a benefit to you from, multiple sources of revenue.
Yeah. Hey, Leo, can we talk a little bit about revenue generation and smoothing that out, being predictable, and maybe what that means for a brand and a company? Because I think everybody wants predictable revenue, but I think we should talk about how we get there.
Well, I think that's it's a great transition, because one of the more wet blanket answers to why is subscription is just a great business model. Right. It's called recurring revenue for a reason, because it recurs with very little work in its ideal state. And so I think one of the reasons subscriptions become so popular across a variety of industries, and we're seeing it really explode in the consumer goods space at this point, is because you get just that. You get some predictable revenue. You may be compressing lifetime value into a shorter time period, but your trade-off there is better demand planning, better inventory management, better forecasting. It can help simplify your business in a number of ways that don't just benefit customer relationships, but actually, office, kind of the office inertia that, hitting monthly sales targets, kind of brings about. If you don't have to start the month at zero when the calendar turns, why would you?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think when the software companies went from licensed to subscription, it was pretty painful. But I think that pain became more palatable when private equities started really taking a liking to the revenue streams, right? All of a sudden that was maybe okay. But the consumer products firms, it's the first time I've ever heard this idea of the compression or shortening of the relationship. That's kind of an interesting outcome. I'm not sure that is that a widely understood phenomena in the direct to consumer space?
Yeah, I think, and Chris probably has some great thoughts on this as well. What we generally see among direct to consumer brands and in the CPG space is, monthly churn is anywhere from 8 to 12%. If you kind of run the math there, you generally have consumers sticking around for 4 to 5 months, and then and then they're churning out. And so what subscription in effect does is takes those takes those orders that you'd be potentially generating from that consumer anyway, and bringing it into a much tighter time frame.
Kind of interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
I don't know that I entirely agree, Leo. 8 to 10%, 8 to 12% is going to put it at like an 8 to 10 month lifetime value. But I did an extensive research with CPG brands, some of them being the largest, we'll say, in like the women's lingerie arena. They were averaging 1.5 purchases per year from the consumer. With the subscription model, we were going to get 10. It also depends on what bucket the product falls into, because with D2C subscriptions, I put them into 2 different buckets. You've got the Discover Delight, similar to what Andy was talking about with his daughter. And then you've also got replenishment, right? You've got the Dollar Shave Club, you've got the Quip, you've got the personal good items that are getting delivered, like for like your Amazon pantry. These are things that are going to be coming every month. That lifetime value is 24 months. That lifetime value is 36 months. And then when you think about streaming, that changes the game as well. So I think the premise of a really good D2C subscription brand is that they're actually going to get more purchases than a typical e-commerce. You're going to get more transactions. You're going to build a relationship with the consumer. The whole point of the subscription model is to provide a experience that you wouldn't get on the retail level. And that's what's allowing these brands to like get more purchases from the consumer. That's why those brands are getting a 5 to 10x to 15x on revenue on business valuations. Dollar Shave Club got 1.2 billion or 1 billion on a $200 million a year revenue. If they were a typical e-commerce brand, they would have got valued at like probably 300 million or 400 million. So I don't think that's necessarily shortening the lifetime. I think you're getting more purchases because you're building a relationship with the consumer.
Oh yeah, sorry. Just to clarify, I'm not necessarily suggesting that it's shortening the lifetime. I'm suggesting that it compresses the lifetime, right?
I don't think so, though. I think you're getting more purchases, and that's why the subscription model is working. I think maybe in some instances it might, but that would mean that the brand wasn't. If a brand's got a lifetime value of 4 to 5 months, they're not even sustainable, probably as is. It needs to get longer than that, really, for the brand to succeed. Because you have to remember, even like with ads, and maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but like your ROAS is always going to be more. You're going to spend more in the first for the customer acquisition than you want on the first purchase. So like they've got to have like this 3-to-1 ratio. So it's got to be much longer than that.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on great points, right? And one of the relative to consumer products, one of the challenges with subscription is that it's highly appealing to a narrow set of customers who have ingrained behaviors with that particular brand or that particular brand's products. And it doesn't necessarily those benefits don't necessarily extend across the swath of potential customers that brand could have. And so I think that's like one of the trade-offs where when you see brands who have kind of those really excellent kind of data KPIs that you're talking about, Chris, they've really done a fantastic job honing in on who that customer is. And I think maybe one of the points that I'm trying to get around to and taking too long to do so is like, you actually innately need to understand who your customer is, what they want, and why they want it, right? It's not as simple as putting a subscribe and save button on your website, in other words.
So Andy, can you talk a little bit about the role of customer experience here? I mean, seems to
Sure.
me that that's a big differentiator between success and failure in the subscription model broadly. But
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to this conversation we've just been having, one of the things that has come to mind is even within the subscription space, there's different levels of friction, right? So you could be signed up for a Netflix, a Disney Plus, or a Peloton, and generally speaking, you may be forgetting that you're paying something monthly for that because it's just hitting your credit card and you're not thinking about it. But the CPG companies or the DTC companies that are sending you hard goods, so to speak, there's that friction point every month or every so often that shows up that we're subscribed to a fish delivery service, and that's great, but we just got another box the other day and realized we actually don't need this, and so I'm probably going to cancel because the experience probably wasn't staged well enough for our needs. And so I think as you think about customer experience and your subscription product, you have to think through the whole experience around not only the offering, but all the various touch points that customers are going to interact with your brand. I also think my point of view, but some of the food service brands have the challenge with the excessive packaging that they have to provide, and so that can be a reason perhaps for someone to decide that they do or they don't want that brand based on that experience itself. So constantly listening to what your audience is saying about the experience they're having with you is important. As a media brand, we invested in customer listening tools to not only track customer service issues, but to track the experience our readers were having with our digital product all the time. So was the ad experience intrusive? Were they able to find the content they wanted to? All of those factors, if done right, led to increased usage, increased loyalty, and if they were done wrong, it was a big problem for us. And so, that listening and learning and constantly, improving over time is critically important, regardless of what your brand is.
so you said something that I think could have gotten past a lot of people, certainly until I got really into this business, would have gotten past me. Said about like being able to listen, learn. It's like instrumentation is an important part of this, right? Being able to monitor the experience at a pretty granular level, and then being able to get analytics on top of that. And I realized we didn't discuss this in our prep, but I'm wondering, for people that are like, if you're in the food business and you think you want to become a subscription company, or you're in the clothing business and you want to get on subscription, you might be a subject matter expert even in the traditional e-commerce of those things. But is there a bit of a learning curve here to get into the subscription business in order to actually manage it effectively?
I would say that once again, it comes back to understanding your audience and what they're willing to do in terms of transaction. I don't have experience having worked in CPG and taking an e-commerce business to subscription, so I'll probably defer to the others. But
on that?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole nother game. I mean, you've seen some of the biggest brands fail at this, right? Under Armour failed at this. You wouldn't think they would, but it's a different business model for a lot of reasons. And to touch on like what Andy talked about, the experience, it is a different experience getting the customer through the checkout process than typical e-commerce. And Andy mentioned the touch points, and this is where brands will fail. It is from the very first time they see one of your ads to the time that they land on your website, they go through the checkout process, the post-delivery checkout, and then the delivery. That experience is to be very, very different. 3-4 years ago, when you were a typical e-commerce brand, you were trying to drive a consumer through the checkout process fast. It was like, how do we limit the number of pages, get them through checkout, and then boom. Now with the subscription model, it's about a little bit more about customization, a little bit more about personalization. You want to gather data on the consumer. And so a typical e-commerce trying to pivot to this model has to, one, think about like predictable inventory for future boxes. You talked about food. Food's like one of the worst to try to do because you got short shelf life. The food goes bad, right? So like if you're trying to predict 3 months from now how much food I need to buy for the subscription box for the subscribers, you're going to run into a big issue if you're off, because that's getting disposed if it doesn't get sold. So you see a lot of brands will fail at this because it is a different business model. You have to focus on retention. It's not just customer acquisition. So now you have to have a whole retention department that's thinking about how do we keep the customers engaged? How do we be proactive and make sure that we're keeping them before they cancel? Because when you think about when you get to like 10,000 subscribers, or let's say 100,000 subscribers, and churn's 10%, you're losing 10,000 a month. So now I have to spend enough marketing dollars to like cover those 10,000. And if I want to grow, I got to spend even more. It's a different world. And that's why you'll see brands that even the biggest brands have failed at this.
Well, I mean, maybe this is a good time to transition to a topic, the fundamentals of subscriptions, because I don't think everybody understands the model. Maybe we could talk a little bit about like just sort of what is being subscribed for. You know, what are the businesses that are becoming subscription oriented, like across industries. So maybe I don't know, one of you guys want to jump in and kind of talk about where the edge is here on subscriptions? I'm pitching
you go first.
I'm happy to go. I just don't want to take up too much talking.
Andy and I can jump in after.
Yeah. So Ken, you're saying, where do I think the limit is on what?
Well, like just what's happening now? What is the
Yeah.
newest category coming in, and like what if I've got a business, like how can I approach?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I think you're seeing like a lot more membership with some brands, like even on the retail level, they're building out membership models. I was just talking to a brand that's, it's like a clothing brand, and they do like these like luxurious shoes in Italy, and they sell for like, I don't know, it's like $300 a pair. Well, you can join their membership model and you get like 4 pairs a year, or there's another model that gets them 40% off all pricing. You're also just seeing it like even in like the gaming and streaming, and I mean EA Sports just moved to a subscription model, so you're seeing it across the board, in my opinion, in almost every part of your life. You're just seeing these brands pivot to this subscription model. And I think that you're going to see more and more things that were on a retail level. I mean, look, COVID accelerated a lot of this. Q4 of COVID had 150 million first-time online buyers. That's like big awareness, right? We saw 10 years of growth in 3 months in online sales. Also, what happened was people that were not as active on social media became way more active. So now you've got this bigger pool of an audience to like now promote to and market to. So when you're going to see it, like, I mean, I think we talked about this in our pre-call. I mean, Chipotle started thinking about introducing a membership model where you can have a burrito a day for a month, right? Like you're going to see it in pretty much every part of your life.
Hey, we got a really timely question. I think I didn't tee this up right. So I'm gonna ask you guys to answer a question that just came in, which is regarding fundamentals. Could you maybe go over some basic metrics of subscriptions, almost like a beginner's perspective, and talk about things like what is churn, retention rate, how do those work, and how long do certain industry subscriptions last?
Well, you probably have some data points, right? I can chime in too after.
Yeah, I think one thing maybe to we'll definitely answer this. One thing to maybe just go over real quick is like Chris, I think, hit on something important that was potentially buried in one of his answers, and that's that there are different types of subscription businesses. And generally speaking, you kind of have like, let's call it 4, but you have curation, you have automated replenishment, you have memberships, and then broadly speaking, and Andy, I'm sure you could break this down a lot further, but like you have media, right? And so, from a perspective, like when we talk about subscription, I think we're talking about it broadly tonight, but each of us are, given where we sit, also bringing a little bit of a different lens to it. From a metrics perspective, I think, kind of high level, you certainly want to think about acquisition of your subscriber base differently than you think about your acquisition of a non-subscriber base if you are an e-commerce brand or you offer a one-off sale of your product. You want to think about customer retention on a cohort basis, so you understand on a monthly, quarterly, or annual, whatever your billing terms are, how many of those customers you retain of that cohort. That would be your retention rate. The more pessimistic view of that would be your churn. Those are the customers who leave you, at the end of that billing cycle.
The importance, by the way, of cohort. I just think it's worth just pointing out why a cohort matters.
Yeah, a cohort matters because if you're not segmenting in that fashion, you actually lose a lot of visibility into how your business is operating. If we have retail folks in the audience, think of cohorts basically as the new version of same store data, right? So if you're an old retail or old school retail, you generally look at your sales performance on a same store basis, quarter over quarter, year over year, so you understand how you improved versus how you changed. If that makes sense. Did you add or remove stores? You can kind of correct for that. Cohorting your customers is kind of the same way to solve that problem today.
And I would add all of those things apply to, media subscriptions. I'd say, there's a general sense, I think, that you tend to also start with customer lifetime value or what you believe your target to be, so that, you're appropriately looking at your acquisition costs in a way that you could break even within a meaningful period of time, right? So, but, all of those, factors come into play. I think from a, tactics standpoint, that's where, and I'm sure this is done, more on the, CPG side too. That's where price testing comes into play and offer testing to, help drive, your ability to convert, better and retain better. And so that's a constant in the world of media subscription marketing is, what's your offer strategy? What's your longer term pricing strategy to, drive retention and reduce churn? So.
You mentioned pricing. How important is pricing? Do you use pricing to drive specific kinds of behavior in these segments we've been talking about? It's a big thing in software, but I'm wondering about in CPG. Does it also, and media? What role does pricing play in getting people to do what you want them to do?
I think pricing matters in media if you want to drive scaled volume. So deeply discounted media offers tend to drive significantly higher volume, but then you have the bigger challenge of how do you achieve your customer lifetime value goals if you've deeply discounted. And so I think you have to look at your pricing strategy based on your audience segmentation strategy, right? So loyal readers, people who are highly engaged with your content, you would try to minimize deeply discounted offers to them because they've already bought into your value proposition. But people who are non-readers, people who don't understand what you have to offer, that would be an example of a place to go deeper. But then thinking about how can you quickly move them to a higher paying, customer quickly.
So one of the things that's going on in media, and I wanted to bring it up a little earlier, but it's really hard to charge for the journalism part of the business. And I don't know about you guys, but I get offers. Almost every media I subscribe to is trying to sell me wine. They're trying to sell me travel. They're trying to sell me games. I'm a New York Times subscriber. They want me to play the games and pay money. Is that sort of like, is a subscription like permission to upsell into other things where actually the money's made?
I think if done right, yes. And I think the Times has, found a good formula, understanding what their readers care about, which is food. I think their crossword puzzles, certainly doing well. And what's, interesting about their cooking app is it's great content, but it's also high utility, right? If you use that, you can plan your meals for the week ahead. It provides you with a shopping list, easily downloadable. And so they've really thought about, back to the customer experience point, why that matters. And I think that's where people are willing to pay for it if it solves a problem. In this case, planning for food for your family, meals for your family during a week, it solves it. If you're simply, charging for great journalism, and there's, no understanding of why your journalism is different than anyone else, I think that's where brands are struggling. And so it's important for, in the case of media in particular, to really own the lane that you are going to own, like the Washington Post does, the Journal, the Times, and I think that's where they're able to extract, revenue from consumers. I think, other interesting plays are, brands like The Strategist or Goop, where it's the intersection of content and commerce. And I think the utility there, once again, is helping readers, understand things maybe they didn't think they needed, but hey, we've shared why you need that face mask, and by the way, you can, buy it here easily through us. And so that's generating, affiliate revenue, other form of revenue for the business. And I think, once again, if your brand lines up against that, that's a good strategy to pursue, but it has to feel authentic.
It's really interesting.
And in those cases, it does.
There are brands doing journalism, like Harry's Razors, right? Doing great journalism. And then there's journalism doing great product. So there is definitely this sort of merging together of these businesses.
No,
I'd also add that there's, go ahead.
No, go. I'll make a comment after you're done there, Andy.
And I'd also just add to that point, I think Peloton does a good job with creating community in their subscription, right? So I think there are different ways to drive engagement and monetization, depending on what that experience is.
The one thing with media and like the journalism thing, what makes it very tough for them is there's so much free content, right? And then you've also got third-party sites, right? So an ad comes out or an article comes out on Cranes and you want to read it. Well, there's a third-party site that grabs that same content, throws it on there, and now it's free. The media, when you're talking about streaming, they can win because they can have exclusive original series, right? Peacock pulls The Office off Netflix and everybody loves The Office. Now you have to sign up for Peacock in order to watch it. With the journalism in the New York Times and Wall Street Journal, like, to me, there's either got to be some like sort of like exclusive content that you can only get there. With the Wall Street Journal, it's like access to like these stock tips or whatever the case may be. Well, now I'm paying and I'm getting value. Or they've got to introduce another product, right? Because there's just so much free content. Like, even to your point about like preparing a meal for 7 days, like I can Google that and find some YouTube video for free and someone's going to give me that information. But if they can pair it up with a product that makes sense, it can work really well. If you look at like the success of FabFitFun, which is a D2C subscription brand, millions of subscribers, they actually started as a content piece where people were going to them for like up-to-date content about like that was targeting the female demographic, goes about working out and being healthy, and then introduced a subscription box, and like that took over, and they've built a tremendous community. So I think all of the brands, the reason why Harry's comes out with content, because they got to provide more value. When it comes to the pricing model, especially with D2C brands, it's like less about like what the price is at, it's about how much value you provide in the consumer. Because something could be $100 a month and something could be 30, but the $100 a month product gets a higher quality consumer, which means there's a longer lifetime value. They've got more discretionary income, so they're inherently going to stay on longer. And like, I hate the discounting. Like, I wish every brand would agree to take out a coupon code spot. Like, if everybody could agree to take out a coupon code spot, one, you would like everybody, all these brands would drive in more revenue. There'd be less like competing over like getting a huge discount on the first purchase. And two, you'd get less consumer regret. Because like, what does everybody do when they see a coupon code spot?
You go on Google, right? You go right on
They
Google,
hit up Retail Me Not, and they try to apply that coupon code. So like, I wish every brand would just like, you go to apple.com, there's no coupon code spot. Why? Because nothing goes on sale and it works.
Yeah, fair enough. One thing I want to touch on before we move on a little bit was the notion of serendipity. I wonder if maybe Leo, you could talk a little bit about, what is the role of surprise? Like, we used to call it client delight in my business, but what is the role of the unexpected?
I think that's it's a really great question. I think it's actually starting to change significantly. If you think about, some of like what Chris mentioned in terms of social usage over the last year, if you think about what Instagram has done, what Pinterest has done, surprise and discovery is actually no longer, it's decoupled significantly now from the actual shopping and like in the consumer mindset experience. A lot of that's now happening kind of further and further up the funnel in your feed as you're scrolling on a daily basis, whether you're at home during COVID, or on the subway or a train, or waiting in traffic, or wherever people, everybody uses their phone everywhere. But discovery, serendipity, that is very much happening at different moments in the, in our kind of cliched term of buyer's journey or customer journey here. But what you are seeing is that the change from traditional retail merchandising experiences to a more decoupled experience, where you now have significantly different stakeholders involved in that discovery. If we kind of like step back for a second, you used to go to the mall, you walked in through an anchor store, there were merchandising displays, something caught your eye. That's great. Let's call it like you went into Macy's, you made that purchase. Macy's owned your entrance into the mall. They owned the discovery aspect of your shopping journey, and they own the purchase. If you try and play that out today, your discovery happens on Instagram. Your purchase happens, I don't know, maybe Macy's, maybe on a D2C site. It's fulfilled by, it's fulfilled by yet another party. And what you're actually seeing happen from a serendipity standpoint is like more and more people actually want to own that piece, because there's a belief that if you own the serendipity, you can own the rest of it. And so there's a fight to get higher and higher in the funnel. Andy, I think you're like nodding your head. This is like media's like dream right here, is to kind of own that piece, right? And so like I'd love to hear your perspective on that, but I think that's kind of what's like where we're at right now.
Absolutely. And I think you stated it really well. I think if you focus just on media, the serendipity that many media companies have perhaps lost over the years is that of the print experience, where you would encounter things that were unexpected in just the experience in itself. And so that's where the digital customer experience has to find creative ways to bring storytelling to life in new and different ways. We were experimenting with things like virtual reality and augmented reality as a way to publish some interesting, exclusive, in-depth pieces, and that was a way to help people be part of the story in a very different way. So bringing to life journalism in a way that they could almost feel like they're participating. So that was, kind of a cool approach as well. In terms of just, other, kind of maybe perhaps more to the Harry's Razors or others. I also think that brands have the opportunity to move away from what maybe used to be called sampling to, getting new versions of what their brand is offering into the hands of their loyal subscribers in a way that feels authentic. That's serendipity, but perhaps a more contemporary version of the old sampling approach. So I think it's a way to show consumers that you're always thinking ahead. You're always keeping their interests in mind, and you want to have them participate in the process with you, and make them a part of making your brand stronger overall.
Thanks. So it might be a good time to talk a little bit, go on to one of our topics, the future of subscriptions and fulfillment. And I know that Justin, who couldn't be with us this evening, was going to be part of that segment with us. But we were when we talked, we were talking about the idea of like building your own environment, building your own subscription. Because what, for example, again, just bring it back to Harry's. I get to decide. Am I going to get aftershave? Am I going to get soap? Am I going to get shampoo? Like I'm building my own Harry's box. Is that kind of access and customization really important on the DTC side, or is it unimportant? Do you guys have a sense of that?
I think it's just the product offering, right? That's a replenishment. Harry's is trying to say they're trying to make it convenient for you for not to have to go to the store anymore to get the razor, to get the shaving cream, to get the shampoo. They're a replenishment. They're essentially like no different than a subscribe and save, with a little bit more of an experience, with like a little fun touch to it. Like if you go to their site, right, it's a really well put together site. And I actually just did a review on Harry's where we walked through their whole website and talked about all the things that they do. I think that with the discover and the curation, it's consumers don't like to make decisions. It's like when you go to a restaurant, there's 100 things on the menu. It's like the worst thing you can have, right?
Yeah, there's some sweet spot there, right? 100 is too many.
Yeah, there's
maybe
a sweet
25
spot,
is
right?
too few, right?
With Andy mentioned with his daughter, she doesn't have to make the decision. Someone's sending her something that she might like, and like that's why that works. Someone's making the decision for them. I'll give you one like quick example of that. I remember October of like 2017, the gentleman's box was going out and had this like floral tie in it, and I was like, this is hideous. I was like, I cannot believe this is going in our box this month. It turned out to be like the highest rated tie we'd ever had. Everybody was like, I never would wear this, but then I wore it to a wedding and I got all these compliments, and they would have never bought it in the store, but it came in the box. So they used it and then they got all these compliments. So you just don't know. I think that works in that sense because people don't have to make a decision. With Harry's, you know what you're getting, and it's serving a need, and it's making your life a little bit easier by having things delivered to you.
When you talk about replenishment, and when we were together, we were talking a little bit about the dash button. Want to revive that conversation?
Yeah, I think I was the one who brought it up. It actually, there's something in the chat from Melanie that I think kind of ties in and relates here. So for folks who haven't seen it, can you talk a little bit about auto renew? I work for a SaaS company, and we go back and forth on whether or not to include it in our contracts. Fear is pissing off or losing customers. It seems to me it's about transparency and offering choice. What I think Melanie's getting at is actually kind of just core to subscription overall, and it's and it's whether you operate from a position of fear of losing the customer, or operate from a more proactive standpoint of earning the trust and renewed business of the customer, right? And so if we kind of relate that to the dash button, what I had brought up about it was I thought it was largely ahead of its time, in that we hadn't yet, as consumers, kind of been introduced to more frictionless experiences for making purchases, whether that be subscriptions overall. I think if memory serves, the dash button came out in like 2014, 2015. How many people had Netflix subscriptions at that time? Like, it's actually like significant. Like, they've grown so significantly in that time period. Other streaming services didn't even exist that we're all familiar with now. As just an example. And so what I think we've learned in that time frame is actually how to be transparent with the customer. And those are the types of lessons that need to be applied to creating those great experiences, whether it's in media, whether it's in curation, whether it's in auto replenishment, or membership opportunities. Nothing's worse than realizing that you've paid for something that you haven't used for 6 months from a brand impression standpoint, right? And so I think from kind of like the Dash experience and Melanie's question, it's very much about the fact that, like, sure, your customer can put this on auto renew, but to Chris's point earlier, like, you have to build out a whole core mechanism within your business to continue to earn that trust in that business.
So I think Mel's question was really specific, though, on the software side of things. I mean, almost every SaaS company I look into, the contracts are annual, renewable. You get a little heads up, 45 days and then 30 days before renewal. And then you're in a renewal cycle. Do any of the panelists have a sense on the preponderance of auto renew in the software space in particular?
I can comment quickly to Leo's point, and this will help answer Melanie's question. You can't be afraid to communicate with the consumer. So we're talking about transparency. That's critical. So Melanie, to answer your question, like, one, it depends on what the cadence is. If this is a monthly SaaS brand, like, it's like, I don't even know a SaaS brand it's annual. Okay. So really the truth is, like, you just want to notify them 30 days before that they're going to renew. And if they don't want to, they should be on an auto renew. And then you just notify them and be fully transparent. Like, hey, you're set to auto renew on May 25th. Give them their 30 days or 15 days prior to the annual renewal, and then let them opt out if they don't want to be renewed. And that would solve your answer. You can't be afraid to notify them, because they're just going to, after they get renewed, they're going to email you and say, I want to cancel. And that's going to cause a bunch of, like, chargebacks and whatnot. And then if you are transparent, then they know that it was happening. You did your part by letting them know, hey, you're renewing on this date. So I think absolutely you put them into renewal and you just notify them prior to the renewal process.
Awesome.
And I'd add, and I don't know what this product is, but I think similar to what media companies do, I think you're in constant communication, I think, as both Chris and Leo said, throughout the process. So absolutely agree with, kind of right beforehand, but we actually did extensive work to determine that within the first 100 days of a subscriber's subscription to our media product, if they weren't engaged, it was virtually impossible to get them engaged and retain. And so having an early engagement process, educating them about the product, and then having recurring touch points throughout that term to remind people to engage with your product. If they're using it, then they will continue to pay for it. If they're not, you're not going to have a chance to save them, but at least these communications and these touch points, I would think, can contribute to hopefully keeping them as engaged as possible.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit about implementing subscriptions. One of my focuses as president of the AMA chapter is to try and give some practical advice when we have this kind of event. And when we were together, we talked about almost anybody could start a subscription business, right? I mean, it's the technology is right at hand. So could one of you guys take us out on how a business can get started in selling by subscription? Don't all jump at once.
I'm happy to chime in. Yeah, so I think, like you mentioned, technology's made it really easy. You can build a Shopify site in 24 hours and throw a recharge or a bold plugin to it to manage the subscriptions. I think what's more important is, and this kind of goes along with any business, like, one, what's the product offering? And two, what's your go-to-market strategy? It's not Field of Dreams. You can build the greatest site and have the greatest product, but if you can't get product discovery, you can't get marketplace, or you can't get it in front of individuals, it doesn't matter. So my advice to anybody that wants to start a subscription is, one, build a go-to-market strategy. And two, make sure that your subscription is providing value. You're putting them into a continuity business, meaning they're going to pay you monthly. So we need to make sure that we're consistently providing value, and it's not transactional. Amazon.com is a transactional business. Chewy.com was able to compete with them because they built an experience around their business. You would have thought in the beginning when Chewy.com was launching, like, oh, I'm going to sell dog food. Like, well, what's so special about that? We can go to Petco, we can go to Amazon.com and get it. But what Chewy did was they built an experience. One, they put things on auto ship before Amazon was doing it. Two, they doubled down and invested a lot of money into their customer service reps, so they were well versed in understanding the product. If I called Amazon and said, "Hey, I've got a 105-pound husky, he's got stomach issues, what kind of food should he get?" They wouldn't have the answer to that question. If I called a Chewy.com rep, they would know the answer to that question. On top of that, I think it was in 2017, I was with the CMO of Chewy.com, and they said they hand wrote like 1 million holiday cards to all their customers. Like, they hand wrote them. Like, that's a crazy experience. And then two, if you order dog food from Chewy and you don't like it, or the dog doesn't eat it, and you call Chewy and say, "Hey, my dog doesn't like this food," they tell you to go donate it to a local rescue. This is an experience that they're building, that's what propelled them to build a successful subscription model. And, then get acquired for like 3.5 billion, I think Petco bought them for, and they weren't even profitable. So those are the sort of things I think that you need to think about. It's easy entry to building a subscription, but we need to provide value and think about the go-to-market strategy.
So there's no shortcut here. Is that what you're telling me?
I don't think there's a shortcut in anything. Yeah, there's no shortcut to anything. I mean, some things go crazy, right? Dollar Shave Club put out a video that went viral. I mean, that was a big uptick as to their success, So, but post that, managing that can be, growing too fast can be very difficult. Growing too fast can kill a business, right? So, there's a lot of things.
So I think that was a very long answer to a really short question, but I think really revealing in that, so the technology is available to us, and in the wrong hands, it's not going to do us any good. And not to criticize people in advance of their business plan, but we need a really great business plan. We need to have a reason for people to want to engage in an ongoing basis with us. We have to have a differentiated offer. We need an awful lot of stuff besides having a way to transact. Is that kind of what people should take away?
That was a perfect summary.
Awesome. So as we're getting near the bottom of an hour together, and that happened really fast, by the way, that's testament to the great content you guys gave us tonight. I want to kind of go into a little bit into your own personal worlds, little lightning round. Andy, what's the best subscription that comes into your house and why? And you two guys, you get a break, you get the advance ones. So Andy, why are you subscribing to something that you really like?
So Peloton would be that. Actually, we don't have a Peloton bike. We have another bike, but we all like, since we couldn't go to the gym for about a year. The range of instruction, the programming is great. And I think the community that they've built is, really unique and different. So that's been something that's kept us fit and healthy for the past year. So now I can go back to the gym. We'll see if I keep using it, but I think I'll find a way to use it. Maybe not as much.
Really interesting that they kind of pull the subscription apart from the hardware. I didn't know they did that.
Yep.
Hey, Chris, what's your favorite subscription in your house? Why'd you take it?
Probably BarkBox. I have 2 huskies at home and I love them. And they get excited when that arrives, and they get treats and different dog toys. And I think BarkBox built a really good business. So that's probably the favorite one that comes in.
Awesome. Leo, what do you got?
I'm gonna go Trade Coffee. Not sure if anybody's familiar with them, but it's actually I do not mind going to buy coffee. It is not a convenience factor from that perspective for me. It's the curation factor. They work with roasters across the country, shaped by my taste and how I rate previous bags. They pick new ones for me. And really the best part is, like, if you actually try and order from those same local roasters yourself, you end up caught up in the nightmare that is our postal service in terms of delivery. Trade somehow has figured out how to get my bags to me on time just about every time. And I think, from a perspective of ordering something online, predictability of when it's going to show up is probably paramount to just about anything else. So that's what I'm going with.
Awesome. It's interesting, the idea that they take the feedback from what you what you tell them you enjoy and tailor your experience on an ongoing basis. I wonder if there's data on customer lifetime value for that kind of tailoring. That'd be interesting to learn more about.
Yeah, I've talked with, I guess, with their CEO, Mike. He has a lot of information on that. They've got a really interesting build out BI and data team there that's, that looks at and splices the data a number of different ways to, to analyze that stuff. But for me, it's just the fact that it shows up and I'm never actually out of coffee.
Yeah, well, I had that experience just a few days ago. I'm going to go check those guys out. Hey, Leo, if people want to reach you and learn more, how can they do that?
Leo at getrepeat.io.
Excellent. Chris, how do people reach you?
Yeah, Chris at subta, subta.com.
And Andy?
It's atyOst@gmail.com.
Awesome. And I can be reached at kl@austinlawrence.com. I want to thank everyone who stuck with us the whole hour. My superstar panel. I'm all in. I'm going to subscribe to all your feeds and make sure that I can up my game, because I definitely love the subscription business. And we're grateful at the AMA chapter for your making this time investment with us. And we'll have a replay out to everyone who registered, including the attendees. And here we are, landed on the hour. So I want to say thanks very much, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks, Ken.
Bye.
Thanks a lot, guys.